Welcome, everyone. This is yet another episode of Disruption Talks, and I was just having this thought to myself that I am also blessed to be running the show, to have done over 40 interviews, and every time when I meet a guest and I pay them massive compliments saying how this has been the best disruption talk ever, what a magnificent guest speaker, then each time the show still manages to surprise me, and the people that we have joining us still manage to just blow me away. Because I could tell you that this is a person with ERC for excellent design, and they've worked at a company NCR, which you might not know, but you have surely used if you've ever taken money out of an ATM, electronic arts, or things like that that will mention games. But when you consider the fact that joining us today is Shelley Armstrong, a person who was directly connected with the first teams that were creating Xbox, yes, the console in Zune. I mean, come on. I'm so blessed. Shelley, great to have you.
Thank you so much, Philip. It's good to be here. Blast from the past, my old Xbox days. Yes, that was definitely a career highlight. I had a good time.
Absolutely. So where does this show find you?
I am in Orlando. I'm sitting at home here because, of course, we all work from home these days. And so we might have a little bit of that Florida sunshine coming in and making it a little hard to see, but hopefully it'll all work out.
Yeah. I'm checking in from Poland, from Wrocław. However, we used to have sun a couple of days ago, so maybe we'll both get lucky. But yeah, please, Shelley, I've given you a not good enough introduction. It's always better if you share the elevator pitch of yourself in terms of what I mentioned, and then we can just start digging deeper.
Well, elevator pitch. Yes, I have been in the design field for longer than I care to admit. I started as a graphic designer many years ago, print and all of that good stuff, and ended up finding myself in the games industry. And when it was really just graphic design on steroids, right? It was for the menus of those games, it was on-screen version of what I'd been doing in print, and kind of learnt this new field as I went, right? Those were in the very early days. And so I became a game artist. I worked at Electronic Arts. I ended up going to Microsoft when they were looking for someone with UI experience and 3D experience for Xbox. Launched the original Xbox, Xbox 360, Zune, and then moved on, worked in agencies, worked at NCR for a number of years on self-checkout through financial, retail, hospitality, and travel at that time. And then less than 2 years ago, I joined Finastra, where I'm the VP of UX and design, and we're a financial software company.
So just before we dive into Finastra, I've got this quote, a personal quote, right? People ignore design that ignores people. We started with an elevator pitch. This one I'd like you to expand on.
Absolutely. Now, I can't claim that I made this one up. It's actually a quote from Frank Chimero, and I may have mangled his name, and if I did, I'm sorry. He wrote a book called The Shape of Design, very good book. But this was his quote, and I have always felt like it really resonated with me. UX is all about the experience we have with our technology, right? Every part of that experience. And in the beginning, it was definitely, it's how to create interfaces that human beings can use with computers, but we weren't very good at thinking about what it's like, trying to make that more human, right? It was like, you're going to learn this language because this is how the computer works. And so we slowly moved away from that and started understanding the value of affordances and understanding people's mental models and what it means to use the software, what it means to make it easier and more effective and intuitive for people. And that is what it's about at its crux for me, is making sure you think about your end user when you're designing your software. What are they expecting? What do they need from you? And if you are considering that and you have that level of empathy, then you'll build software that really works for them. and they trust it and they have an emotional connection with it. It's all good. And that then takes it on the next step into all the kinds of people that you want to use your software applications, right? Not just the able-bodied ones among us that, you might have started there, but you have to start thinking about what about the aging demographic? What about people with visual impairments or, hearing challenges or motor control issues? The computer is not necessarily the most accommodating place for people with those issues. And so you have to start thinking about, how do we make it inclusive? How do we make sure that our solutions are accessible and usable by anyone who wants to use them? And that's what it means to me. You don't ignore the people. We have to accommodate their needs and not expect them to accommodate ours. So that quote always, it sort of sums up the whole point of UX for me.
And whilst I was listening to you elaborate on this quote, what came to my mind was I don't have a name to mispronounce because I just don't remember who said it, but it was a quote about ads and commercials that people don't watch ads, people watch things that interest them that sometimes happen to be ads. So simply applying the same logic of you're here for them, they're not here for you. So
Exactly.
Diving deep into Finastra, how does it work? Whose lives are being improved if they interact with Finastra? What's Finastra about?
So Finastra is as a financial software company. We make all sort of financial products, mostly for, some for end users. We have digital banking, we have mobile banking, all of that. So those are end consumers are using those products. But we also make the majority of our products for the people who work within the financial industry and are serving those end customers. So everything from opening accounts to processing loans to core banking systems, trade and capital markets, corporate banking, all the pieces of software that make them able to run their business and move money around and, take care of all of those needs. I think what we're doing beyond just the fact that we are a business, of course, and these are the areas of expertise for us. But I think what we're doing with trying to do well by doing good is really impactful to me. It's one of the reasons I joined the company. We do believe that finance is open for all. We want to democratize finance. We want to make it not just this mystifying thing that not everybody understands. So we want to provide those tools for people who need financial literacy, start to learn about how to bank successfully and how to manage their financial health. We try to work on algorithmic bias, for instance. There's a lot of instances where people of color, for instance, frequently get declined for loans or have a higher threshold for getting a loan for a house, which is all about the unconscious bias, right, within people. But then we do a lot of machine learning. And if we just add that unconscious bias to, our machine learning is only as smart as what we tell it, you end up with these algorithms that are unfairly disadvantaging people for no good reason. And so we do a lot of work there of trying to eliminate that unconscious bias in our machine learning and help point things out so that, for instance, we had a hackathon. We actually had one just recently, but our last year's hackathon, one of the projects that came out of that was this FinEqual application, which allows people to take a look at their approvals when they're providing loans to people and making sure you're taking out that bias and sort of letting people realize, you approved this one for this couple. This couple has the same kind of financial, background. They should be approved also. And so it's helping you hopefully eliminate that bias. And like I said, that training going into algorithm and machine learning helps make sure that it doesn't automatically suck in the biases that people may already have. So we have a lot of different initiatives across the world about making financial products and literacy accessible to everyone. So that's something I'm pretty proud of. We're a business, but we're still trying to do good.
On that note, I have to say that I don't want to say this year or the past year, but let's throw last 12, 18 months. I think that has been a very impactful time for financial literacy organically. If you know what I'm talking about, I'm thinking everything that Elon Musk does on his Twitter concerning cryptocurrency sways, everything that we've seen with Reddit Wall Street Bets and GameStop and everybody trying to use a Robinhood app in the States, Revolut app if they're in Europe, that has been a massive push just in terms of people wanting to find out, not being educated actively, but simply being interested to the point of, I will want to understand how a hedge fund works. I will want to understand how I can get some savings. What is the stock market really? So that is there's a very promising trend, but of course it needs to be. It's like a current that somehow needs to be steered to avoid spilling over into a wrong thing, right? So
Yeah, it definitely needs to be channeled, right? I think it's awesome that people are bucking the system a little bit. And I think that's with the emergence of all of the fintechs that are out there, right? Again, it's aligned with that notion of democratizing finance, hedge funds and, trading and all of these things that are have been traditionally thought of as a very wealthy person's game, right? We can open that up to other people. Now we have to be clear about the risks, right? Because there's a certain amount of gambling when you go into the stock market. So you have to give people the information they need to make good decisions. But yeah, we're allowing people access into a world that they haven't had much room to play in before. And I think that's the rise of all those fintechs, which is why Finastra, with our open platform, we try to connect fintechs with banks and with consumers, because again, you should be able to access all of these things, regardless of whether you're a massive tier 1 bank or whether you're just a small business. So again, those opportunities should be available for all.
That was the exact same notion that we concluded with when I had Philip, the CEO of Zilch, CEO and founder of Zilch, the UK BNPL that doesn't keep you at the merchant, but it keeps you with the card so you can do whatever. And we discussed this concept of personal cash flow and how it is that companies, for example, are able to take out a line of credit against their future revenues. Or even startups right now are able to do that with pipe.com. I really like that company and the concept of it. But somehow if you're a single individual employee and your cash flow, which basically means your salary coming in, let's say 7 days from now, all of a sudden you're not allowed to have some sort of cash flow line of credit that would allow you to get 17 pounds on a KFC bucket. So all of these trends are basically taking what the enterprise has and always had and putting it in some shape or form or adjusted way from what the big organizations used to have. So let's keep those sort of conceptual discussions for later, because I want to make sure that we talk about Finastra. So you are the VP of UX and design at Finastra, and what I'm curious about, because design, I imagine, is, I don't want to say emotional, even though that's what I'm meaning, that it's something that sort of touches you inside. It doesn't have to be a art like painting, but whatever you do, you are being empathetic. You're considering the context of the other person, of the user. You're considering many aspects. So there surely are highs and lows. There surely are situations where you're ecstatic, and there are surely situations where there's a VP of UX design at whichever company that your days truly are interesting. Can you shed some light on that? Or maybe I'm wrong.
No, I mean, there's frustrations in any job, right? That's why it's a job. If it was fun all the time, they wouldn't pay me. That's I used to say that all the time, because people went, "Oh, you work at Xbox, you make games. It must be the most amazing thing. I wish I could do that." And I'm like, they don't pay you to do something that you just love all of the time. There's a downside. So there's always frustrations. You choose your poison, right? Startups can move very quickly, can make decisions, can be very agile, but they can be volatile, right? And they can, disappear, and then if you don't have income, right? And then corporate world, things move a little more slowly than perhaps you'd like. But there's more stability, and there's sometimes more impact to reach larger audiences. So regardless of what company you work in, and I've worked in big companies, I've worked in startups, I've worked for myself, I've done agency work. you choose your poison. What are you most irritated about? There's a tax you pay to do the job you love. And you just have to make sure that tax doesn't get too high, right? Those minor irritations are always going to be there. I would say, Finastra has really been a breath of fresh air for me. I've really enjoyed joining this company because they are so aligned with some of the values that I have. And so I do feel like I'm doing some of my best work, because I'm touching lives. I'm doing things that hopefully will improve financial situations and financial literacy. I have an awesome team that I get to mentor and watch grow. And, so there's a lot of really great things for me at Finastra. I'd say that the things that are frustrating are there's so much to do, right? We have a number of different products and they can't all get our full attention. We're not a massive team. And so there's that prioritization, which is always painful. You're like, but I just want to fix that thing. I know that we could make this a better experience, but we have to say, no, we can't do everything with excellence. So you do have to make those hard decisions and say, I'm going to focus our time and effort here. And I'm sorry, this particular project, which I know I could do something for, is going to have to wait its turn. So I think that's a consistent issue that you'll hear probably from any design leader. Always too much to do and not enough time in the day to get it done.
So saving the world is great, but it's a full-time job as well. So yeah, and I'm actually looking at the comments right now. Outside of the praise, we also have one question. The question asks whether they can ask a question. So the answer is yes, for sure, absolutely, ask away, and we'll make sure to put your question when the Q&A session comes. So absolutely, you're invited to do so. So you said that when you joined Finastra, it was like a breath of fresh air, but it was a breath of fresh air within 3 months of that fresh air breath, you had to put on a mask, didn't you? Because the pandemic hit. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, all my best laid plans were laid waste right there. Yeah. One of the things that I was planning to do, I was asked to do when I joined Finastra, was train our product and technology teams in design thinking. I've built design thinking programs in the past, and I've facilitated and done a lot of workshops over the years. And I was happy to join Finastra, where there was a belief in that ability for us to reshape how we design product and teach everybody who touches product how we can have empathy for the user, how we can come up with solutions that are humanistic and use those methodologies. And so typically when I've done that in the past, I go host workshops and train the trainer, all around the company. And yeah, after the first 3 months, it was like, I'm not going anywhere. I've been grounded. It's been the longest time in my adult life that I haven't been on a plane. But we had to pivot or persevere, right? That's the design thinking way of doing things. I could sit and bemoan and cry that the plans aren't going to work anymore, or you can pivot and figure out how to make it work. And so what we chose to do was build an online version of the design thinking workshop that I had planned. And so my team and I worked really hard with a third-party vendor as well to do the e-learning program. And we just launched that last month. So our first group are going through. They're going to be our design thinking champions, our new evangelists. And we have a program for the whole of the year to train people. So we had to make changes there. That one's a successful one. I think the other big change that was a two-edged sword, right? I think one of the things is we're all forced to be at home. We're all forced to do Zoom calls. People are getting to see a little bit into one another's lives, probably in ways that we hadn't anticipated with our coworkers and our colleagues. And I think one of the nice things that came out of that was heightened empathy for your coworkers, right? Somebody whose child is crying and needs some attention, and it's like, no, go do it. That's totally get it. My dogs that bark and snore and act like fools around me. There are things that happen in people's lives, and I think it makes us all a bit more human, because we have to show that side of us a little bit more. I mean, I have bad hair because I haven't had a haircut in a while, but whereas before I might have been perfectly coiffed in my nice outfit and going into the office. Now, you get to see me at maybe not my most polished, but that makes us all human. And I think we have a greater sense of empathy and understanding for our colleagues and coworkers. And I hope that continues.
So I heard about a lot of things that you learned. Was there anything that you had to unlearn? Was there anything that was no longer fit for the new reality?
Mm. That's a good one. I'm not sure that it was unlearning, but I do think there's certain things that don't work as well when everything's remote. If I go back to the design thinking workshops, usually I would host those in person with customers and colleagues. And when you do that remotely, you can't hold people's attention for a day or 2 days all online. It just, people drift, right? There's a different energy than being in the room together. And so you have to pick and choose the things that work remotely. And some of those might be favorite things you used to do, exercises or activities that really helped in person that don't work as well. They don't translate to remote. And so you had to kind of rejigger your plan and figure out what works better remotely. And, I think one of the big things for me is in those workshops, it's kind of exhausting to be a facilitator in those instances, right? Because it's harder to read the room. It's harder to make sure everybody's engaged. So things like that, I think, you had to set those aside. This has always worked for me in the past, but I gotta figure out how it works in this new reality.
1000% right there with you when it comes to workshops, because we do those a lot. I participate in those product design sprints, for example, and I don't want to say the old, because I'm sure it's coming back. It's coming back. It's surely coming back, right? The reality of having the physical workshops, the cigarette breaks, so the ultimate linking and connecting exercise, right? So we too had to do away with 9 to 5 kind of workshop, intermediated with breaks or lunch, and just had to boil it down to 3-4 hours sessions per day. But actually, we also were able to. That's the upside of the convenience. That usually when you would run a workshop, you would need to have all of the stakeholders on site, and sometimes some sessions weren't necessarily something that necessitated their presence or required their attention. Whilst here, you just pieces of the puzzle, 3-4 hours today. I will need that person. You can leave after 2 hours. So the efficiency unlock, even though the inconvenience of no human contact is just there, and it's so undeniable, right? So we're actually getting some questions, and we are having questions from Singapore, from Nashville. We're going global here. And since this is on the Finastra topic still, I would like to entertain it now. Anton asks a brief description of your workday at the commission level.
Sure.
So, work and what happens?
Well, I come and sit here in front of my computer, and I check my emails. I check what I'm supposed to be doing for the day, and sadly, the one thing at my level is I spend a lot of time on calls. I feel like I talk for a living at this point. I do less of the physical design work. My team are doing that, and I'm maybe just pointing them in the direction I'd like to see us go and letting them get on with it. So a lot of what I do is evangelize the importance of UX and proper process and how to do it right, and make sure that we're advocating for our end users. So that's a lot of what I do. I work with senior leadership to bring up things that I think we should be tackling. I devise the strategy, the UX strategy. What are we trying to do? What are we going to focus on? I meet with different products teams. I meet with customers. I meet with my team, of course. So it's a lot of meetings. I talk all of the time. But no 2 days are exactly the same, right? Because every day is a new set of questions or challenges that come up that people need help or guidance with. And so a lot of it is, I feel like my job is kind of like the gardener. I'm removing the obstacles for people to do the good work. So I'm weeding, and I'm trying to provide that conducive environment for people to do great work. It's important for me that my team feels like a creative family, right? That they have each other's back, they feel heard, they feel they're allowed to fail. We have to experiment, we have to push. So it's really important for me that the team feel like they trust me and they know I have their back. And so when they raise things to me, I go and try and get, smooth things over, pave the path for them so they can do their best work. And then I just get out of their way.
So I heard one cry for help, if I might call it that way. You said that you no longer do the nitty gritty, the dirty work of design itself. You sound like you miss it. Do you ever actually step in and pick up whatever the pool of choices, a stylus, a tablet, wherever it is, and just
it's one of those things that a lot of people, when you're a young designer, you think, oh, it would be so great to be in charge. I could make sure everything goes so smoothly. I could do things my way. But what you realize is you don't have more control, because really you're letting other people do the work. You're trying to nudge it, you're trying to guide it, trying to get it to go in the right direction, but you don't want to micromanage people. Nobody wants that, telling you exactly how to do everything. So you have to be willing to let people do things their way and empower them to do things their way. But the control that I maybe don't have, I think I have more impact, right? Because people do listen, to, my advice or my direction, or I've been doing this a really long time, so I can usually come up with an anecdote or a story as to why we should do something. So I can be persuasive. I do sometimes miss the physicality, the tangible design output. But what I've done over the years is I keep my creative side filled with other things. I try not to jump in and do things my way. And frankly, I'm not the expert in these tools anymore. I'm not working in them day in, day out. I haven't really used Figma, I'm embarrassed to say. But my team love it and they use it, right? So I'm not as up on the tools of the trade in the way I used to be. So it's better to let them do that. But I can guide things. I can set the strategy. I can put the goalposts out there and make sure everyone understands that that's where we need to get. And then I let them do it. I let them figure out how to get there. And you're pleasantly surprised because there's things you might not have thought of, right? Because you're only one person and all of us are smarter than any of us. So let's see what new ideas other people have. Otherwise, you could keep churning out the same thing over and over again, right? And you don't want to do that.
All of us are smarter than any of us. I love it. And, I'm not sure about the current job openings at Finastra, but perhaps there's some, intern position where you could, apply and say, sorry, my camera doesn't work. And just, in the meantime, as a part-time hobby, just push out some really nice things.
I could, I just could go undercover, but I'm not sure I'm that good as a detective that I might give myself away.
So yeah, Anton's saying thank you for the answer. So thank you for the answer, Shelley. And please, any questions you have, place them in the comments and we'll be addressing that. But coming back to the people ignoring design that ignores them, the current state of design in the financial world, how much ignorance is there towards its users? If we could NPS it 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend the current design state of the financial world? And I am really hoping for a more sophisticated answer than just a line between the incumbents and the neobanks, right? So let's make it difficult.
I think it's a broad scale, right? There's this scale of UX maturity, right, for any company, not just the design organization, as to whether UX is ignored or whether it's something that's ad hoc, sometimes applied, sometimes not, or whether it's really institutionalized. It's part of the process. It's part of how you design and build products. And financial, honestly, has historically lagged in that, right? Has not been at the forefront of doing the best work there, getting the most up to date. You have a lot of banks that maybe have very old legacy systems, and but it's painful to change, right? It's like having a heart transplant. They've been using something for 20 years, and you have to train all of their users on this new thing. And, it's a big deal. It's scary. So financial institutions have traditionally been quite slow to move forward and make change. I think that when we look at ignoring people, the design that ignores people, about 10 years ago was when you started to see that happening. I think Wells Fargo had to pay $17 million of fines because their web applications and weren't accessible to people with disabilities, right? They had to go in and fix those standards because everybody needs access to their money, right? Regardless of whether they're, able-bodied or not. And so I think that started to put a spotlight on, wow, you can't get away with this anymore. You can't just rest on your laurels and say, we've always done it this way. And so more and more people started to pay more attention to the different web accessibility standards. How do we make this accessible to people? Certainly in my NCR days, we had to think about ATMs. What happens if, a blind person wants to use the ATM? What happens if, a deaf person needs to use the ATM? Are we making our screens interpretable and accessible to other assisted devices so they can still use them? And so these are the kinds of things that people started to pay attention to more and more. And we have all sorts of compliance guidelines all over the world, which state we should be doing that, right? So I'm not sure I can give one NPS score to the entire industry because I think it varies in pockets. You've got people, some of the big guys are doing better because they have deep pockets and they're able to invest in that. I think some of the new fintechs are doing great work because they are democratizing aspects of finance that didn't, exist for the regular person. But at the same time, some, small fintechs may not be thinking about accessibility. They may not be thinking about some of those larger concerns that they'll get there, but maybe that's not top of mind for now. So it varies. I can't give you one score. I would say that we are not doing as much as we should, is definitely how I feel about it. I think there's a lot of work to be done still, but I think we're on that path. I think that people have higher expectations of what our software applications can do for us now. And, they're not judging us on other applications. They're judging us on the experience they have, on their phone every day. So you can't hide behind, this is expert software. You need training for this software. It's like, no, that boat sailed 10 years ago. We're all consumers. We all expect that high grade, seamless, simple and intuitive experience because we know it's possible. So, I think we have higher standards for our software applications today than we may have in the past.
And especially speaking of accessibility, it's, I don't want to call it a low-hanging fruit because it's not something that you just do and it's done. It's something that has to be, how do we keep our DNA, but also sort of connected to, if I may call it that way, the API of that person, of how they perceive the world, essentially, how they interact with it. For example, there's this image flowing around social media over the past week of how there's a bridge and the bridge has a railing. And on that railing, there's a description in Braille of what is the entire panoramic view of the eyesight. And it's not just about saying, oh, how cool of them that they have thought about it, but just the reach and the engagement that such a picture produces. And likewise, if a company all of a sudden does something that delivers such a heartwarming experience, because essentially that's sort of what it is for the majority of the world. When they see a company that focuses on such things, it's always, perhaps I'm being too salesy here, but it just is in favor outside of the core value of being able to get more users. It's the kind of users that will make you look better. So you're not just improving their lives, but there are just so many added benefits concerning focusing over there. And just like you said, of course, a startup that's growing, it's had teething pains, it's just pre-Series A, so they're trying to make ends meet, if you can call it, with the money that is being invested currently in seed rounds. And it won't be the focus for them, but perhaps that's just space for someone to enter and to start looking into off-the-shelf accessibility solutions that some startups could implement without really thinking about it.
Absolutely. I think that's, if you want to be a leader in a space like this, I think building some of those standards into your products, making them accessible, and sharing that knowledge. I mean, we have our own design system, we have our own platform. We're very open with, sharing some of those principles, sharing what we try to do, because at the end of the day, it benefits us all, right? And you're right. It sounds touchy-feely when you talk about accessibility or inclusivity in the workplace or any of those things. Sometimes people are like, that's kind of touchy-feely, but it actually has an impact on the bottom line. People who feel valued and heard at work are more engaged. They stay with their companies longer. They're more committed. It affects your bottom line. And so I think doing right by your people and your customers is an intrinsic part of good business, right? If you want that emotional connection with the brands and solutions out there, which we're human beings, we do, that's just it. It's the basics. Does it do what I need it to do? Oh, does it make me feel really smart when I'm doing it because I'm doing this stuff and it's so easy? Do I trust this? Once you get there, that's emotional engagement now. And I'm starting to tell other people about this product. So as companies, we want that, right? We want people to love the solutions we build. We want them to trust them. We want them to enjoy using them. We want them to tell other people. So that emotional connection is hugely important. And I think sometimes we can ignore that. And to our detriment, to your point about the braille on the bridge railing, that's awesome, right? These are the things that maybe aren't going to make you a lot of money necessarily, but they show who you are. They show who you are as a company. They show who you are as someone or an entity that cares about how everybody can enjoy, whether it's the view, whether it's the software we build, the cars we drive, whatever it is, we're allowing people in and not blocking them out. And I think showing who you are like that in multiple ways, whether it's just social media posts that might go viral, is important because you do want that emotional connection with your audience. They help you make better products, and truly engaged customers and employees help you make money and do better as a company as well. And we all feel better when we are doing something that has intrinsic value and worth, right? Some integrity. It's more than just an application.
And to be honest, to even polarize it, even if you're Scrooge McDuck or Mr. Burns from The Simpsons, it still makes sense. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to make an assumption here, but it might be standing on a building in sand here. Adapting or developing from scratch a new approach that's accessibility focused, it's not that huge a cost. We're not talking about refactoring your banking system. We're not talking about developing a mobile app from zero to the end. This is just a translation. This is essentially a translation of the interface that you already have going on, making sure that the person who perceives the world differently is able to do that, right? So I'm not wrong here. It's not typically a...
It can vary. I mean, sometimes it depends on the age of the system and how it was built and all of that good stuff. But yeah, some things are going to be harder than others. But yeah, there's a lot of tools out there to help, right? None of this has to be, throw everything away and start again. There's a lot of, tools in operating systems, for instance, and on the web that you can take advantage of, simple things like changing the size of the text, allowing people to adjust their contrast, allowing people to adjust the speed of their mouse or their input devices, right? For someone who might have motor skill disability. So there's lots of things you can do that are already out there for you. You just have to be mindful about doing it, right? And not leaving it as an afterthought.
So thanks for confirming this. And even like I said, even if you're Scrooge McDuck, you care only about the bottom line. This is such a huge ROI unlock. You get new users. who are going to be much more loyal because you're probably going to be the pioneer or the leader in your space or your geography or whatever is the common denominator of whomever you're competing with. And the PR, also massive, typically,
Mhm.
especially from the people who will be the evangelists, the advocates, the promoters, even because they are using this themselves on a daily basis, or people like you and I who simply care about such things and want to make sure that it's promoted in the world. So there's literally no reason for you to not focus on accessibility, because even if you don't care right here, you will care right here because it's just going to make that much sense.
No,
So
absolutely. It's definitely one of those things that, I wish more people would jump on that bandwagon and think about it. Again, to me, it all starts with empathy, understanding how other people view the world, how they interact with the world, and what's important to them. And you have to think about that every time. Every time you build any application, you have to think about it from all of those different points of view. Are we providing any barriers to entry for people? Are we making it difficult for them to reverse a decision, or have the confidence to do something without worrying that they've, screwed everything up? So having that idea of forgiveness in your UI to make sure that people aren't painting themselves in a corner, right? All of that's hugely important.
So, see, I wasn't that far off when I said that design is parallel to a sort of more emotional approach to work. We discussed empathy over here, right? So now we can talk about trust and trust or lack thereof. How much of it can be a design problem and how much of it can be solved by design teams? Do you think, because I mean, we established that correct design, either in terms of accessibility, in terms of day-to-day usage, whatever the aspect is, it reinforces a bond. This app gets me, they understand me, I'm not even thinking about the things I'm doing and I'm achieving what I want. A transfer to me or to someone else, a loan, a payment, whatever it is. So trust, at which point is it that design can do only so much when it comes to trust, or can it be the absolute pillar of trust?
I have a tendency to believe, because I do believe that design can change the world. I do believe that design can do a lot. I think before you get into the design phase, though, you have to recognize that whatever you're doing needs to be authentic. If a brand is jumping on the bandwagon of something, okay, well, here's an example, and I'm not going to name names, but there's a lot of people calling out certain big brands recently during Pride Month, for instance, right? All of a sudden, the American Twitter, American and UK sort of Western world had, their pride banners on Twitter, on Facebook, and everything. And then you see what it really looks like in other parts of the world where, from a business perspective, that's frowned on. And so all of a sudden, that's not authentic, right? You're jumping on a bandwagon to say you're for something in this part of the world, but not this part of the world, right? Because that hurts your bottom line to come out and say that. So that is not an authentic expression. And people know it and they'll call you on it, and you will not have that emotional connection. You will not have that trust. So it has to align with your company and what the things that you're actually doing, right? You can't just make these claims of, look how great we are. We're behind you all the way, except here. So that's one part of it. But I do believe that design has the power to reshape how we do this and build that trust, because designers, our secret sauce is that empathy. It's the ability to see the world from another person's perspective. And, when we build more inclusive teams, then we get viewpoints that are not just singular. We're looking at it from different geographies, different demographics, different abilities, different lenses. And so, when I said all of us are smarter than any of us, that helps us build software that's more inclusive, right? Because everyone can bring their point of view and perhaps open your eyes to something that you didn't realize was an issue. So there's a lot that design can do there. I think we have the power to guide it and make sure we're staying away from those dark patterns, make sure we're doing things that are advocating for the user, and instead of trying to trick them, just to get our end result. And that's what I mean when I talk about designing products with integrity, right? We want to give people the information they need to make good decisions, right? We don't want to hide things from them or try and trick them into doing something. We want to inform them and let them make those decisions and have ownership over their financial literacy, over their financial situation. And you only do that by being open and transparent. And as designers, we have to always stand up for that, always be the voice in the room to say, is this really helping this end user accomplish their goal? Not just us, you know? So I think design has a really huge part to play in that. But it takes everybody. It takes everybody to be committed and be willing to have design courage sometimes. Because if you're a young designer, maybe new to the field, and you're surrounded by product owners and engineers that all seem to know what they're doing, and you know you have a concern about something, it might be hard for you to stand up and say, I don't think this is the right way to go, you know? But it's what we're supposed to do, right? As UX professionals, we are the ones that have to advocate for the user and stand up and say, I think there's a better way to do this. We can accomplish our goals and also inform the user and help them accomplish theirs.
I want to pick up on a quote by a certain Shelley Armstrong from the last time we spoke. It was during the Disruption Forum earlier this year. You shared that you really do believe that UX has the power to change the world, even if it is only one pixel at a time. We have the power to shape experiences and be the advocates of our end users. People want to feel like they're valued. They want to put their money where their mouth is. They gravitate towards the brands that share their values. So basically, just to reiterate what you said and to warn you that this episode is going to be a bountiful of quotes. So expect more and more like that in visual form and video form. But before we jump onto the last two questions that we always ask our guests, I want to entertain some questions from the audience. So Maria asks, how as a designer can you avoid personal bias?
Yeah, that's a good one. Because honestly, personal biases are almost always unconscious. You know, I don't think many people actively wake up in the in the morning and think, I'm going to be against this. I'm going to be biased against this person or that concept. So sometimes you just have to check yourself, right? You know, you have to think about, you know, is this the right thing to do? Does it make sense to the user? And whose feedback should I get on this? You know, because frequently you're not designing for yourself, right? You know, I know how I like my applications to work, but I am one person and I can't design everything in the way that I want it to work. I have to consider how other people use it. And so sometimes that's just about getting feedback. You know, I think critique it's a lost art, sadly, but I think critique is really important in your teams. You have to be able to be tough on designs, but kind to the people, and you know, point out flaws that might exist that you might have blinders to. We were actually the CEO of our company, Simon Paris, is a big advocate for, you know, gender disparity in the workplace and everything, and we have a big goal of having, you know, gender parity at Finastra in the top levels, you know, over time. And we've actually increased the number of senior women in the company over the years. So there's good stuff happening there. But some people don't realize that they're saying things or doing things that might be biased. And an example was we were having a women's leadership meeting, and Simon had joined to add his support and understand some of the issues. And we were asking around the room about some of the different things that maybe ticked off some of the senior women. And, you know, someone mentioned the fact that they hated the phrase man hours, right? Because that's an unconscious bias, right? It's, you know, people hours is kind of a weird thing to say, but, you know, you can just say how many hours is something going to take. And, you know, Simon had said, you know, I didn't even consider that. It didn't occur to me until you brought it up. And now you say it. It's like, duh, you know. And he mentioned, you know, similar epiphanies that he'd had in the past when, you know, someone had mentioned that this was a bad time to have a meeting because this is the time most people with children had to go pick up their kids from school. And he was like, well, you know what? I hadn't been thinking about that. And of course we can change the time of this meeting. So sometimes it's just paying attention and asking questions. Is this good? Is this good for everybody? You know, does this work? What am I not seeing? Frequently a question I ask when I do research is what did I not ask? What do you need to tell me that I didn't cover? So it's being willing to listen to other people's input and how the design affects them. Because sometimes it's just something you just wouldn't have thought of because you don't encounter that day in, day out. And you need someone else to open your eyes to it. So I recommend asking for feedback often and broadening your feedback loop to make sure you're getting as many different feedback as possible from different kinds of people. And that will help you, I think. But I think the big thing is just being willing to listen and ask the question.
And assuming that you do have a bias, because it's not like you wake up just like you said every day and gotta watch out for this bias and that bias. You don't know. That's the point of a bias. You're not supposed to be aware of it because then it's a dislike or a like, but it's active, not passive. So, and I think that resonates a lot for founders as well. This logical fallacy of anecdotal evidence. So the way that I like to do my stuff is, and then let's implement it all that way. I mean, personally, whenever I feel like I have a very good idea, and the way I ask people to bounce it off them is, tell me why I'm a fool. Like, what am I not? What am I really not seeing? Why am I being stupid enough to believe that this is a-okay? So, good advice, regardless if you're a designer or not, but in particular, when you consider the fact that you have to expect that your work will have slightly more end user facing interaction than for example a developer. But Adam asks a question other than obviously showering you with praise, a specific book that's stuck in your head recently.
Ooh, a book on design or just a book?
Yes, one of those.
You know, I'm always reading books on design. So, you know, I mentioned that Shape of Design from Frank Kimaro. I thought was a good book. I have a friend who wrote a great book, The Universal Principles of Design, William Lidwell. Plug for Will. No, it's a great book because a lot of people don't know the basics and the reasons behind why some of these principles work. So I think it's a really good sort of desktop kind of dictionary, you know, of some principles. So that's a good one. I read Radical Candor a number of years ago that I really enjoyed because, again, with that notion of being open and transparent and, you know, making sure you're giving people feedback and making sure you're open to feedback, I think is really important. So Radical Candor, I thought was a great one on teams and how to foster that open communication that is so important.
Okay, Adam, hope you got that one. And then there's the last question from the audience, and I really hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Please tell me why I'm a fool in the comments if I'm saying it wrong, but I think it's Jala, not Yala. I want to dive into UX/UI design so that as a new starter in the field, what would you advise me? And if I may add on top of that, how big of a focus should I be paying to no-code solutions, assuming, perhaps incorrectly, that in the future, I will be either expected as a designer to have knowledge of no-code tools or be considered as a super person of sorts, or like a X-Men of design, if I will be able to not only do the things a designer or a product designer does right now, but also be able to put those things into fruition of, let's say, creating a startup, helping co-found the MVP, anything.
Yeah, no, I think it's UX design has many fields within it. And I know over the years, we've always talked about those unicorns, you know, can you code, can you design, can you research, can you, you know, are all of these things. I don't think there's really such a thing as a true unicorn who can do it all. I think that's more of a startup fantasy, right? Because you really want someone who's a good all-rounder because you don't want to hire a big team. I do believe in T-shaped people. I do believe that we have strengths and we have adjacent skills that complement those strengths, but we might not be masters of those skills, right? We may just be competent, right? So I do think it's important to get a good grounding in understanding all of the different disciplines that go into UX. I think service design is really important because so many people, when they think about UX/UI, they think the two things are the same, right? UX is about the experience, UI is about the screen. And UI is a component of UX, but it's, you know, the two things aren't the same. It's a subset. And so when you take that service design lens, which is the holistic approach, the experience someone has throughout the life cycle of a product, everything from purchasing, knowing about it, awareness, purchasing it, getting it set up, using it, getting support if something goes wrong, and all the way to end of lifing, right? It's no longer something we're going to use. How do we migrate or transition to the next thing? Having that holistic view, I think, is really important because it does make you a better designer. And you'll find over time the place that you specialize a little bit more, the place that you become really strong. I talk about having a competency signature. And so we all have these different UX skills, and some of us are going to be masters in it, and some of us are going to be beginners. And we kind of try and cross-train our whole organization within the UX group to follow their learning path and learn more about some of the places that they're not as skilled yet. But you're always going to have somewhere where one or two things that you're really, really good at, you're known for. So I don't think you need to learn to do everything. However, I love those kind of tools that democratize that, right? Because great ideas come from everywhere. And just because you can't code it, you don't have those technical skills, doesn't mean it's not a great idea. And so we talk a lot about that on our team, about building the tools and widgets that allow anyone who wants to use our platform at Finastra to build applications. And you don't have to be a developer in order to do that. Of course, that's maybe the faster route, but how do we open that up and make it accessible to anyone? And so when we had our recent hackathon, we were very cognizant of making sure you don't have to be a coder to join this hackathon. We can match you with a diverse team. So we'll have the technical support, but just because you work in sales or marketing or in HR doesn't mean you can't be part of a hackathon. It's not just for our engineering partners. And, building, like I said, those tools that allow people to create something and bring it out into the world and not have a ton of code as their barrier. And so our design system, we were recently just really pleased because one of our product owners built their first little application using our design system and our components that we have shared, but without our involvement. And they did a nice job, So that's what you want to do. It's not about, design is not about, owning everything. Design is about facilitating, to me, allowing other people to bring ideas to life within some guidelines that you create for them. So I do think those like low code or no code options are really important.
So jack of all trades, master of none, and the original quote actually goes still better than a master of one, right? So just like you said, the democratization and generalism with the specialism if you have, and if you don't, just use the tools that democratize it for you. I gotta ask, because we are enjoying this conversation sinfully too much, because we're about to reach the full hour, but I still have a question or two. Is there a thing that is prohibiting you from continuing, or are we able to?
No, I can stay on for a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, absolutely. So the question, the last one from the audience, reaches back to trust. And the question is, how can designers who work on multiple products, like freelancers or agencies, stay focused on each client and user's trust? So I'm guessing we're juxtaposing trust and context switching here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's down to the principles, the approach you have to design, no matter what. I always think that you have to think about, does this benefit the user? Does this benefit the business or the business goals? And is it the right way to do it? And if you have those intentions in your design process, it doesn't matter who you're designing for or what you're designing, because those are the principles that are guiding you. And if you have those internal principles, then you won't be wrong, right? You'll always be bringing that agenda into the work, no matter what. So to me, it's, think about what you're trying to do. Think about who you want to be as a designer, and think about what principles support that. And when you know that, and everything that you do comes from that, then it doesn't matter how many clients you have and how many context switches you have to do, because your process is the same.
Okay, so Rafa, hope that satisfied your thirst for knowledge here. And the last two questions that Netguru has to you, these are questions that we always ask our guests. So they're kind of light, they're not really tech focused. Uh, Number one is about decision-making framework. So what's your rule of thumb? Just like, let's say the simplest rule of thumb is cake good? Yes. Is it good for me? Well, not always, or not in the quantities that I would like to have it in. So do you have any framework like that that helps you get through the day, or helps you get through not the day, but the difficult decisions, the things that, other design leaders could be interested in hearing?
So I think, yes. I mean, I touched on a little bit there, with your principles, right? You have to think about, am I advocating for the user? Is this good for the user? Is it good for the business? Because you can't just focus on the end user, because unless you're in a complete nonprofit, right? There are business goals. So you need to understand those and make sure that you're factoring that in as well. So there's definitely that framework. I look at things and, like I said, good for the user, good for the business. And does it affect the brand of my team, right? Are we doing this with excellence? Are we squeezing something in we shouldn't be? And as such, we might not have the time to give it the attention it deserves, right? So those are kind of the framework I use for work decisions. But also, I think just in general, and I use this in work, I use this in my personal life, I have this little mantra on any tricky decision, is it truthful? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And if I can say yes to all of those, then I can probably go ahead and do what I need to do. If it's not truthful, then why are you even doing it, right? Is it necessary? Is it going to help people to know this? Or is this just going to cause them concern or, make their lives more difficult? And then finally, are you saying it in a way that is tactful and kind, right? Because most people don't wake up in the morning and decide they want to do something wrong, or you just have to. How can you tell people that their behavior maybe is not what it should be, and say that with radical candor, but still in a kind way, because they're your colleague, your coworker. You want to preserve that relationship. And I think it's Simon Sinek that says, you have to care about the people, not just the outcomes. And, that is one of my principles, I guess.
Truthful, necessary, kind. I love it. I think I saw this on some Instagram page about how feedback without kindness is basically violence or aggression, something that punchy. So the last question that I have, and this is the most lighthearted question you can imagine, I'm handing you a virtual remote magic wand, and I would like you to abracadabra us into a world where every 12-year-old in the planet all of a sudden is either taught or is granted access to a specific kind of education. And we've heard about design thinking. We've heard about empathy. We heard about financial prudence. We've heard about many things. Coding, of course, that being like the most tired answer in some sense. But there's no wrong or right answer. There's only the answer that is yours. So I want to hear your answer, and I want to hear why it's yours.
All right. Well, I would say that, and this will sound familiar, empathy, I think, is critical. People need to have understanding for other perspectives and other point of view. I think that's crucial. And, after the last few years of political situation, critical thinking. I want people to be able to to tell the difference between, what's a conspiracy theory, what's really happening, what articles are real, what is spin and propaganda. And I'd love people to be able to argue based on information, not deeply felt beliefs that may or may not be correct, right? So a little bit of critical thinking. Is it likely that this is really a grand conspiracy, or is it likely that this Nigerian prince really wants to give you some money because he came into an inheritance? Just figure it out.
I'm still waiting on my payout, to be honest. So
Me too.
Maybe it's the same one. Maybe we can go to small claims court. I don't know. Okay, so Shelley, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the answer. Thank you so much for those absolutely fruitful 66 minutes on the dot. And well, since this wasn't the first time, I'm hoping it's not going to be the last time we're going to be doing something just like this. So thank you so much. And thank you, dear audience, for attending, for your interesting questions. And see you next week on our next episode of Disruption Talks, this time with contests. So, once again, thank you, Shelley. Thank you, audience. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.